The first edition of the 2022 college football rankings dropped last night, and just like every year, they're receiving a ton of backlash. Today, I'm going to be going over the top 25 and just sharing my thoughts on what I think the committee did wrong. Before we get to today's video, make sure to smash that subscribe button and turn on those notifications if you're new to my channel. If you're watching this video, odds are that you love college football, and odds are you aren't subscribed to my channel. So make sure to subscribe to one of the best college football communities here on YouTube. I'll be posting college football videos every day during the season, so make sure to subscribe so you never miss a video. Also, make sure to drop a like on this video as well. It helps out with that YouTube algorithm and helps share the video with more college football fans. Plus, it only takes a second to do. Every week this season, I've been posting my own personal top 25 following every weekend of the college football season. Now, I posted a top 25 after this weekend, but I'm gonna have different thoughts on the playoff rankings compared to what I had in my top 25. Because in that top 25, I know I had teams higher or lower than in this college football playoff ranking, and I'm gonna be talking about why I think it's wrong. Like, for example, in my top 25 video, I had Ohio State ranked number 1, and in the playoff rankings, they have Tennessee at number 1, something I don't have a problem with. So I just wanted to throw that out there in case there are a couple of inconsistencies with what I think the rankings should be. So before I get to my main problems with the rankings, I just wanted to share my quick takeaways from the rankings 10 through 25. First off, when looking at Texas at number 24, the only reason I think the Longhorns are even ranked inside the top 25 is because it's a boost to Alabama's resume by having a win over a top 25 opponent. I mean, if you're going to put a 3-loss team in there, you can make the case for a number of other 3-loss teams. You could also make the case for a lot of other 2-loss teams as well. So I think the only reason Texas came in at number 24 was to help out Alabama's resume. When looking at the rest of these rankings, I don't really have too many issues. It would just be a few teams being a little higher or a little lower, like I had in my top 25 video from the other day. Like, for example, I'd have UCLA higher, I'd have Kansas State higher, and I'd have Utah higher. I would also have teams like Penn State and Ole Miss ranked a little lower. But probably my biggest issue outside of the teams inside the top 9 is LSU coming in at number 10. They came in at number 15 in the AP poll, and I thought that was a very appropriate spot for the Tigers. But I can't help but think that them being ranked number 10 is another way for Alabama to have an impressive victory added to their resume. I mean, when looking at LSU's schedule, they're the highest ranked team that has 2 losses, with the next closest being Kansas State, who has looked like a much better 6-2 team than the Tigers. LSU has only 1 ranked win, and it came against number 11 Ole Miss, so I guess you can make the case they have a better win than Kansas State does, but I just don't buy it. Again, I have no problem with LSU being ranked around 14 to 16, but having them as a top 10 team in the country is just flat out insane. So yeah, those are my initial thoughts on teams ranked 10 through 25. Now it's time to get to my main issues from the top 9. Now, before I get to my issues, I just want to say, I know none of this matters right now because it's all going to play itself out over the next month of the season. But I always hate that excuse by the playoff committee that everything's going to play itself out. If that's the case, then why even have rankings this early in the season? Why not just have rankings for the final 2 to 3 weeks? The whole point of these rankings is to get a gauge of who the better teams in all of college football are. Regardless if it's going to work itself out over the next month, you should reward the teams that have been playing better than other teams. And the playoff committee once again has a number of inconsistencies when explaining that. I'll start at the top with Tennessee at number 1, and I don't have any problems with that. I know I didn't have them ranked number 1 in my personal top 25, but looking back at it, I definitely should have, and I think the Vols are the best team in all of college football right now. Up next, we have Ohio State at 2 and Georgia at 3, and now I know I had Ohio State ranked number 1 in my top 25 video, but after really diving into it and giving it some more consideration, I actually would have flipped Georgia and Ohio State. When looking at both their schedules this season, it's been pretty identical for both of these teams. They're undefeated, they have a ranked win, and they've had a game in which they had to overcome adversity and win the game at the very end. This past weekend, Ohio State was losing in the 4th quarter at Penn State, but they were able to turn things around in the 4th quarter and pull off the victory. Earlier in the season, Georgia was facing the same thing on the road at Missouri, which arguably is a much worse opponent, but they were able to turn things around and still pull out the victory. So when looking at both of these schools, I give the edge to Georgia for their massive win in week 1 against Oregon. I mean, according to the playoff rankings, the Ducks are the number 8 team in all of college football. So that's the second most impressive victory by any college team this season. But you could also make the argument that it's the number 1 win because of how dominant it was. I mean, they beat the number 8 team in the country by 46 points. But according to the committee, it looks like Ohio State is over them because they're comfort behind victory over Penn State and because they just have an overall better offense than Georgia does. Here's what the new chairman, Boo Corrigan, had to say in regards to putting Ohio State over Georgia.
Well, I think the explosive nature of their offense at Ohio State, and C.J. Stroud, Marvin Harrison Jr., the win over Penn State, the way they came back to win that game. Again, very close, two well-balanced teams. But at the end of the day, the committee decided that we would go with Ohio State number 2 and Georgia number 3.
Again, like I mentioned, it's not too big of a deal because I think you could really make the case for either team. But when looking at the resume for both these teams, I think that Georgia's win over Oregon has to have them at number 2 at this point in the college football season. I get it, Ohio State beat Penn State, who's ranked 15 in the country, but outside of that, their schedule has been really damn easy. The next issue I have is having Clemson over Michigan. This seems to be a pretty popular take that has a lot of college football fans confused. Now, it's clear as to why the committee put Clemson above Michigan, and it's because they have 3 wins against teams that are ranked inside the top 25 of the college football playoff poll, whereas Michigan has only 1. But in those wins, Clemson really struggled and honestly could have lost a number of those games. In their win on the road at Wake Forest, they needed double overtime to pull out the victory, but it looks like late in the 4th quarter, that was going to be Wake Forest winning the game. It was a back and forth game for Clemson against NC State until the Tigers really pulled away in the 4th quarter. Then they recently beat Syracuse, but that was a game that Syracuse led for majority of the game. If it wasn't for the Orange forgetting to score in the second half, that's a game that Clemson would have lost. Not to mention, Clemson also had another close game against Florida State in which they won by only 6 points. So again, I get it, they're undefeated and they have 3 wins against top 25 opponents, but just based on the eye test alone, Michigan has looked like the much better team. Now, if you want to look at Michigan's lone top 25 win against Penn State, that was a game that they dominated in the second half. I mean, they beat Penn State by 24 points, a team that was leading Ohio State in the 4th quarter. I think Michigan's win over Penn State is far more impressive than any of Clemson's so far this season. So again, at this point, it doesn't necessarily matter all that much, but if you're the College Football Playoff Committee, are you ranking these teams based on the eye test, or are you just looking at what the resume says? But if you're looking at what the resume says, wouldn't Georgia be ranked above Ohio State? Oh, and we're going to be talking about my main issue with the College Football Playoff Committee with this next ranking. Yeah, my biggest beef with these rankings is the fact that TCU is behind Alabama. Once again, I'm going to throw a clip in here from Boo Corrigan explaining why exactly they put the Tide ahead of the Horned Frogs.
TCU, they've had some deficits, but they've come back to win. They, too, have an explosive offense like Ohio State and Tennessee. Alabama's had myriad struggles and a loss. Why is Alabama ranked ahead of TCU?
Well, I think you look at TCU, and again, we're looking for a balanced team, offense and defense, and they have gotten behind in some games. They've been able to come back and win those games. But when you look at Alabama in the wins, against Mississippi State, at Arkansas, at Texas, and obviously a 3-point loss at Tennessee. As a committee, we decided to go Alabama 6 and TCU 7.
Yeah, I'm not exactly certain that's really that much of a reason, Boo. I saw this on Reddit and I thought this made a lot of sense and was the perfect explanation. Georgia was down 10 points to Missouri in the 4th quarter. Clemson was behind Syracuse and Wake Forest in the 4th quarter. Tennessee had to go to overtime versus Pittsburgh and was losing to Alabama. Ohio State was losing to Penn State in the 4th quarter. Meanwhile, Alabama lost by 1 point to Texas. If we're using this logic from the committee, then Michigan should be number 1 because from a look at the box scores, they're the only top team that hasn't been trailing near the end of a game. So when comparing the two teams, Alabama is 7-1, whereas TCU is 8-0. But both of these resumes are entirely different. TCU is ranked number 7 after 4 consecutive victories over top 20 teams. Now, when looking back at their schedule, Oklahoma and Kansas are no longer ranked, but at the time, those were massive wins for TCU. And when looking at the resume now, they have wins over Oklahoma State and against Kansas State, teams that are ranked number 13 and number 18 in the college football playoff top 25. Whereas you look at Alabama, and they only have 1 win over a top 25 team, and it's a 1-point victory over Texas, who again, I think the committee ranked at number 23 just so Alabama could have a top 25 victory. They mentioned them having impressive victories over Arkansas and Mississippi State, which sure, they were ranked at the time when they played them, but both those teams aren't even ranked in the top 25 right now. Not to mention, Alabama has a loss already, and they could have lost to Texas back in week 2, and they honestly should have lost to Texas A&M. Again, like I said, it's all going to sort itself out, and it doesn't necessarily matter at this point in the season, but you have to admit, Alabama is just getting the edge over TCU when the Horned Frogs have clearly been the better team. Now, if these two teams were to meet up this weekend, do I think Alabama would win? Almost certainly, but you can't disrespect TCU and the insane start to the season they've had. I think I saw somewhere that their strength of record is the 3rd best in all of college football, but yet they're behind Alabama. So I just think it's incredibly disrespectful to TCU, and I think by having them ranked at number 7, you're already giving them a potential chance of missing out on the college football playoff once again. I mean, we're not even going to talk about how the Horned Frogs got screwed all those years ago. So if TCU is able to win out, then yeah, they'll be in the college football playoff and none of it's going to matter. But my main issue with the college football playoff committee every season is the same thing. They just have no consistency. We honestly have no idea what it is the committee really values the most. Is it the eye test? We don't really know. Is it picking up top 25 wins on your resume? Well, clearly not. Is it their perception on who the best teams are supposed to be? That honestly might be it. So when it's all said and done a month from now, we are likely going to know who the 4 best teams in all of college football are. But if the season plays out the way it potentially can, there might be 5, 6, or even 7 teams that are fighting for playoff spots. And if that's the case, I think we all know who the committee is going to ultimately go with. So yeah, like I mentioned, all of these rankings are going to play themselves out over the next few weeks. But at this point, with a month to go, I really think it's unfair to teams like Michigan and TCU that are really deserving of being higher in the rankings. So what are your thoughts on the college football playoff rankings? Are you like me and think that there are a number of inconsistencies that need to be changed? Or do you also think it doesn't matter because we have a month of the college football season left and it's all going to play itself out? Whatever your thoughts are on the rankings, let me know in the comment section down below. Before you guys leave, don't forget to smash that subscribe button and turn on those notifications if you're new to my channel. If you love college football, then this is definitely the place for you. Like I mentioned earlier, I'll be posting videos every day during the season, so make sure to subscribe if you call yourself a college football fan. Also, make sure to drop a like on this video as well. It helps out with that YouTube algorithm and helps share the video with more college football fans. Plus, it only takes a second to do. As always, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you all in my next video.